All right, we're going to talk about the declining birth rate in the United States, but everywhere, really. Every country has this happening. Elon Musk has been on this one for a long time. And you might think, so what? I'm alive. I'm going to be living my life and there'll be enough people for me to live a life, right? Who says to this, I don't care. But what about the world we leave our children? What about the economy as a result of a declining population? Well, here's what Elon Musk says about this. He says that humanity is dying.
Well, there's a lot of things, I suppose, that I worry about, but and some of these things will seem esoteric to people. The birth rate is very low in almost every country, and it's something, unless that changes, civilization will disappear. America had the lowest birth rate, I believe, ever. That was last year. Places like Korea, the birth rate is 1/3 replacement rate. So that means in 3 generations, Korea will be 3 or 4% of its current size. And nothing seems to be turning that around. Humanity is dying. And people, it's just not something we evolved to react to.
All right. Well, the New York Times now is reporting that the Trump administration may be looking into incentivizing women, American women, with a baby bonus, $5,000 to every American mother after delivery. We have seen incentives like this actually work in Eastern countries before. For example, in China, some places are offering couples money to marry earlier in order to incentivize them to start their family. Russia offers mothers sizable cash payments if birthing mothers are younger than 27, with which they can use this money to buy a home, for childcare, for medical expenses. In Hungary, birthing mothers under 30 are exempt from personal income tax for the rest of their lives. So those things have, in fact, resulted in a bump in the birth rate. So is this something that the U.S. would want to do? Would it work? And do we need it? Well, Toria Brooke is a cultural commentator and is vocal about the birth rate crisis. I apologize. And she joins us today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I think this issue is more than just about relationships. Look at our economy right now. We're trying to rebuild after Biden. The inflation rate has gone down since February. So we're at 2.4% versus March's 2.8%. But ultimately, families are turning towards farm source materials because farmer source materials, food, any resources they can get because the grocery stores aren't cutting it. I think we need to tackle the economic implications as a whole before just targeting families. I mean, look at the hurricane victims in North Carolina and the fire victims in Maui. We haven't even really tackled that. I think that all Americans are struggling right now. And at the end of the day, single income households are not working. Our national debt is at 36.22 trillion. It is one of the highest that we've ever had. So in order to encourage people to have more children, it's more than a $5,000 incentive. We need to focus on getting the nuclear family back together, lowering our debt, and encouraging families to even exist at all.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. And we had the director of the Birth Gap film on our show a couple of years ago, and looking deeply at what caused the birth gap. It always followed massive recessions and economic downturns. I mean, you saw in Japan, right? They've never really recovered from it. Russia, after the fall of the Soviet Union, was devastating, right? So Russia put in these financial incentives to really help its people in that way. But I think you're right. America is hit with a double whammy. So we have what the liberals have done over the last 20, 25 years in the United States, have basically told people, don't have children. You don't need to be married. Guess what? Having kids is actually kind of a bad thing. It's hurting the environment. You can't afford it. And then they also lumped on top of it a massively devastating economy. So I think America may be in worse shape than Japan. What do you think?
I think right now, especially with relationships, social media took a huge hit on communication and the way that men and women interact. And there's just been this whole feminist wave that really encouraged women to think that men weren't useful to them and they weren't helpful. And at the end of the day, we both need each other. That's how we coexist. So men are providers and protectors, and women are supposed to be, caretakers at home. And some choose to have careers. But I think that women would be more encouraged to seek relations with men if it was more suggested as a society, yes, this is something that you guys should be striving towards. And God created man and woman to be together, and that truly needs to be resolved, including in the church, which has been really money hungry, which is interesting because really there should be more giving back considering the economic state that we're in.
But this is an anti-feminist message. Telling women, another thing the Times reports is that the Trump administration wants to, quote, educate women on their menstrual cycles, to which I'm sure AOC fainted at the very mention of it, in part so they can better understand when they're ovulating and able to conceive. This is something women are not taught in sex education in public school. They're only taught to put a sticky pad on your underwear and then off you go, right? And then where to get some birth control. They're not actually taught how you reproduce, how you may want to be in control of that. And so people who want to talk like this are put on the back foot because we're called anti-feminists, because we want to talk about the fact that our bodies were built to do this and that it might be good for society, right? How do you feel about that?
Well, I think sex education in the education system should be reformed because let's face it, men would actually be a lot more successful in their relationships if they understood that, and women have 4 cycles throughout the month. So believe it or not, there is a week out of the month where a woman will be hotter than the other 3 weeks. So if men understood this, maybe they would be able to be more communicative in their relationships. So yeah, if school is teaching better economic, information of how to manage your finances and your taxes, and sex education that wasn't just about not getting pregnant, we'd probably be in a way better place as a society educating our youth.
Right. No, sex education is mostly about avoiding sex. No, they want you to have the sex. They don't want you to have the resulting baby. That is the purpose.
Yeah, they'll teach you in nursery school now how to have sex, and put books in the children's libraries about it, and all sorts of weird perversions and stuff like that. But they don't want you to actually have a family. That's been the liberal agenda for the last 30 years.
Yeah, and it's really a shame. And I think that people are starting to realize this, though. You see a lot of movements, especially on Instagram, for holistic health, getting back into the home. And I think that's encouraged. And even today on the food front, RFK just announced that the harmful food dyes are going to be banned effective at 4 p.m. Eastern today. So pretty exciting. I know people have been really anxious to see more change in the food system. I know fluoride's also being banned, but all these things affect fertility, right? So I had this conversation a couple months ago on OAN with Ivory Hecker and Rachel Wilson, and we were discussing the things that affect fertility. And now we're being a lot more educated that it's not just about age, right? It's about the things that we're consuming in our bodies. And I think that needs to be more of a priority in teaching people how to have families.
Yeah.
Men's fertility has plummeted also. I mean, you're talking about the women's side, but it's like it takes 2 to tango, and the men are, suffering massively from whatever's causing, this massive fertility drop in men. Do you think that $5,000, this plan that's being floated by the Trump administration, would actually work? Do you think it would encourage people if they still can't afford a house and still struggling with all this massive credit card debt?
I think the idea is a start, but I think that it's going to take a lot more than $5,000 and as an incentive to get people to have kids, right? Because in order to have children, you have to have a relationship. So I don't know if $5,000 would incentivize a man or a woman to say, hey, I'm going to get locked down and let's have kids. But I think as a culture, the more we continue to push the messaging that, hey, we were put on this earth to procreate, have families, and better this world. That's what we have to keep promoting, and it takes positive people like us.
Right. I want to ask you about this because a few weeks ago, the New York Times published this story called The Unspoken Grief of Never Becoming a Grandparent. And so when you think about the birth gap and you think, well, I'm alive, I have some kids, what does it matter? What I've been pondering is the messages of selfishness, that you don't need to have kids. You want to keep having fun, so then you can't have responsibilities because it's so great to be a childless-free person. But then you think about how you have nobody to take care of you when you get older, but also you deprive your parents who gave you, everything you needed to grow up, this joy of becoming a grandparent. And so I just really feel like you don't see it, how selfish these choices can be.
Well, like I said, until we fix some of the national debt here, Jim Ricker is actually an investment banker and a lawyer who's been prevalent in many administrations in Washington, actually said that there's a rumor going around that Trump may release 150 trillion back into the economy, which may cause a little bit of happiness and, maybe some retail therapy. But I do agree with you that economic standpoint, as well as the selfishness, we have been taught as a society that you will be fulfilled on your own. But the truth is, you've got a lot of these childless people that are walking around that don't feel fulfilled. So I think multiple factors go into this. And if you want to choose to not have children, that should be allowed as well. But I think the Trump administration is trying to go in the right direction with the $5,000 to start.
Yeah, I think you're right. Toria Brooke, great to see you. Thank you so much for your perspective on this. A lot to digest, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.